Welcome to this special episode of the Jewish Diaspora Report. On this bonus episode, we finish up getting surrounded one last time. Let's get started. For those of you listeners who haven't heard our last few episodes, this is a continuation or a part 4, so go back and listen to the first 3. Otherwise, this episode may not make as much sense to you. For those of you who have listened to our last episodes, thank you for listening and coming back for the last one. I did want to make sure we got this one done because so many things are happening right now in the Middle East that for sure next week I'm going to have to talk about something different, so I wanted to get this last piece out of the way. So we're going to pick up where we left off last time, which was the 4th claim by Mr. Alkhatib from the show on YouTube, Surrounded, where he, a Gazan, takes on a bunch of pro-Palestinian people, and we decide if his claims are accurate or not. So let's get right into claim number 4.
My next claim is, being pro-Palestine necessitates accepting a free Palestine side by side next to Israel.
You know, I don't understand your logic, because basically you sound to me like somebody during the Revolutionary War to be like, hey, let's just wait and see if the British change their ways. That's basically what you're saying to me. That's the whole time I've been sitting there just listening to you justify colonization, justify persecution, justify genocide. Because until we divest from Israel and until we take military money away from Israel, then there is no two-state solution.
First, I'd like to point out the fact that this person's rambling sort of didn't really even touch the claim that Al-Khatib is making, that a two-state solution requires both sides in order to get along, which is kind of common sense. But his analogy, saying you're just like the Americans saying, let's just see if the British get away from the colonization idea and just give us our freedom, is completely ridiculous. The Palestinian Arabs, which weren't really Palestinian Arabs until the 1960s, before they became Palestinian Arabs, were offered a state in 1937 under the Peel Commission. They rejected it. 1948, rejected it. They never asked for a state from the Jordanians or the Egyptians while they were being controlled by those people between 48 and 67. And only after the 1960s did they decide that apparently they wanted a state. And if I quote a leader of the PLO, Zuhair Moshin, he said that the creation of a Palestinian state was literally just a weapon against Israel. It wasn't for the Palestinian people. It was simply to try and destroy Israel. And that's a direct quote. And of course, we've talked on this podcast before about the 1990s, the 2000s. There have been dozens of attempts at a two-state solution that the Palestinian Arabs have rejected for a whole bunch of reasons I don't have time to go into. So comparing the American Revolution to the situation going on in the Palestinian Arab territories is actually ridiculous. A closer analogy might have been that the British decided we're going to have a state called Canada and you're going to have a state called America and you can have it and it can be yours. Here's the border. But the Americans said, no, you know what? We want all of North America. Unfortunately, it's not a great analogy that this person used because neither the Americans nor the British are actually indigenous, whereas in the case of the Jews, they are, and the Arabs are the colonizers. So the analogy he used was kind of dumb in the first place. The most ironic part about this comment that he's made, other than the fact that he ignored the entire claim that was being made, is the fact that he apparently is calling for a one-state solution. So we are saying that we need to live side by side with the people, Jews and Arabs, but this guy's saying, no, if any Jews are there, it's colonization. They need to go. So you're going against Mr. Al-Khatib's claim, which is that we need to live side by side. But you're claiming, as a non-Palestinian, that the Palestinians shouldn't let the Jews live there at all. It's colonization. It's ethnic cleansing. Yet again, another example of these people telling a Gazan what to think, what to do, and what the solution is. Which, by the way, ironically, is how we got into this situation in the first place. Western foreign powers splitting lands that didn't belong to them. Not really, anyway. And funny enough, Mr. Al-Khatib says something very similar right here. Listen to what he has to say to this gentleman.
What I don't appreciate are non-Palestinians who are very patronizing and very disrespectful toward divergent Palestinian views as if they have a monopolistic absolute truth that only they share. Understand that the Palestinian community, just like any other community, we are not monolithic. We have a variety of perspectives.
Oh, the irony of Western useful idiots telling a Gazan what the Gazans should do, and they have a monopoly on deciding what's best for the Gazans. It's quite ironic. Let's hear what the next lady has to say.
So your claim is that we should have a two-state solution, correct?
In essence, yes. Regardless of the specifics of the borders, we have to accept that a free Palestine is only going to exist side by side with Israel.
So you're accepting that Israel needs to give up their occupation of the Palestinian people, correct?
Absolutely. But we need to agree on what constitutes occupation. For some people, the entirety of the existence of Israel means occupation. Whereas at
and you
this
don't
point,
agree that it does?
That's a moot point right now because Israel is a de jure
It's not
international.
a moot point because the 2018 nation-state law states that only Jewish people have the right to self-determination, taking away any rights of Arab Israelis, of Palestinian people. So they are legally removing any type of legal representation of Palestinian people. That's including yourself.
I always love when people like to quote things they know literally nothing about, but they think they sound really smart because it is technically true. They just don't know what it means. But we'll get back to that in a second. One thing I think is very important to mention is the idea of occupation. I like that Al-Khatib mentions the very specific issue of what constitutes an occupation, whereas some people believe that any Jewish person living on the land counts as an occupation because they like to pretend that the Jews weren't there first and haven't been there the entire time. The other fact is that the areas that are not currently controlled by the state of Israel, places like Gaza and the West Bank area A and B, that are under Palestinian Arab control, are also not occupied. The only slight issue of this supposed claim of occupation are that people don't like that they don't have full autonomy over their land, and that unfortunately, due to the pause in the Oslo Accords, things are in a little bit of a no man's land. We've talked about that on our podcast on previous episodes. But for all intents and purposes, there is no actual occupation. It is a complete falsehood, suggesting that any Jewish people there or any Jewish ownership of land, no matter where it is, counts as an occupation. And Jews need to leave and put the Palestinian Arabs in control, despite the fact that not a single point in history had a Palestinian Arab in control. It's literally never happened. So why you claim we need to go back to this world where a Palestinian is in control is kind of funny because it's never existed before. But let's now get to this nation-state law, which this person definitely 100% heard on TikTok and has no idea what it is. In 2018, the Israeli Knesset, or parliament, passed a law called the nation-state law, which just simply pointed out the fact that the Jewish people have an indigenous right to self-determination in the land of Israel. It actually doesn't mention anybody else. It doesn't remove rights from anybody. It doesn't hold anyone back. It doesn't provide the Jewish people with anything more than everybody else has. And it's ironic because the actual law, being a democracy, was challenged in court. And the Israeli Supreme Court, which is not known to be very conservative, ruled that the nation-state law does not break any kind of law, and it is equal to all because it doesn't mention anybody else. If it would have said the Jews have more rights than the Arabs, or that Palestinians do not have a right to self-determination, that would be against the law. However, the court decided that it's simply a symbolic gesture to suggest that the Jews are in fact indigenous and do have a right to self-determination in the land, and doesn't place any restrictions or any changes to anybody else in the land. An Arab Israeli can still go buy land anywhere in the state that they want. An Arab Israeli still has a right to live or move or go anywhere they want. And ironically, a Palestinian Arab who is not Israeli hasn't lost any rights that they didn't already have before. It has changed nothing. So the idea that this law specifically oppresses Arabs, oppresses Christians, is completely made up. It oppresses nobody, as proven in the Supreme Court of Israel. Simply, it points out a known fact that the Israeli government, for whatever reason, wanted to put in law. And I'll be honest, I think I know why they did it, because it's happening currently right now. the Israeli Knesset just passed another symbolic law that suggests that the Israelis have sovereignty over the land of the West Bank Area C. It doesn't actually change anything on the ground. No one's moving, no one's being pushed out. It's simply acknowledging the fact that the world is claiming that the Jews have no right to live where they're living. So the Israeli government decides, you know what? Because you guys are claiming we don't have a right here, or it's not obvious to the world that we have a right to be here, then we'll pass a law that says we do. It's just a little ironic that the more the world pressures Israel into claiming that we don't belong here, or we need to give up our homeland, or we need to not be in charge, the more people do symbolic acts like this by just proving we're not going anywhere. So this claim that this woman is making, that this law proves there's an oppression or there's an apartheid or that there's some sort of inequality in Israel proper, is completely bullshit, and she has no idea what she's talking about. After Al-Khatib decides to tell her the two-state solution, how you have land swaps and cut the land up and all of that, she's not having any of that. She's going to tell a Gazan that a two-state solution doesn't work. Take a listen.
Why should the Palestinians give up their land in the first place?
The
Israeli state was built on top of Palestinian land. It was built on top of the blood of Palestinian people. Your family has suffered for this, and you are not acknowledging your own family's pain. I'm baffled by this. I'm confused. I don't understand.
At this point,
as a non-Arab person, this confuses me that somebody who is Arab does not acknowledge the pain of their own family member.
Here you have, yet again, another Western useful idiot telling the Gazan how he should be feeling and what he should be expecting and wanting from the future, which is just so ironic. At least she admits she has no idea what he's talking about and she's confused. At least that's one step in the right direction, understanding you don't know what you're talking about and you are confused. And who are you to tell a Gazan that he should hold a grudge and never want peace with the Israelis because you decided that he shouldn't have it? The Israelis also have a claim to the land and have also had a lot of trauma. Should they not want a two-state solution? Who are you to make this decision for him? Shouldn't he be the one who gets to decide if he wants to have a two-state solution or not? The reality is that that land was not Palestinian land. That land was not built on top of Palestinian blood. The reality is that the land that was owned by Israelis and Jews before they became Israelis was all legally purchased land, which is kind of ironic considering the Muslims who stole it, that the Israelis were buying it from, didn't really have a right to own it either since they stole it. Most people who listen to this podcast probably already know the Jews were there. You read about it in history books, the Bible, the Torah, the Christian Bible, even the Quran says the Jews were there. There's no question. We do then know that the Romans and the Christians took it over. The Muslims then took it from the Christians, none of which were legally purchased or legally owned by anybody. Then, eventually, the British took it over, and the British were cutting it up and giving it to different groups. Never in the past was it owned by Palestinians. It wasn't really even owned by the Arabs. As a perfect example of what we're talking about here, and I've talked about this on the podcast before, the West Bank, also known as Judea and Samaria, was Israeli land. That was under the Israeli state until it was taken over, and Jews had lived there continuously for generations. The only reason it became the West Bank, or became Arab land, is because Jordan stole it. In 1948, they captured it illegally in a war. Then they kicked out and killed all of the Jews in that area, and it became Muslim land without any Jews. So today, for people to claim that the area of the West Bank or Judea and Samaria is somehow more Arab than anywhere else, only because they stole it in a war, is kind of laughable. It wasn't Palestinian land. It was stolen by Muslims known as the Jordanians. And then following the 1967 war, when the Jordanians started it and then lost, Israel took over the West Bank, offered it back to Jordan. They refused. So Israel then de facto became the owner of that land. So in some very specific quote unquote settlements, the Jewish people who had been kicked out of their land or their children went back. So it was still technically speaking Jewish land until it was stolen, and then it was returned to its original owners, which is the same that could be said about the city of Jerusalem, which also was filled with a majority of Jews. Before 1948, it was a Jewish city. Then in 1948, the Jordanians stole it, and it became a Muslim city. So today, for the Muslims to claim we want East Jerusalem back because it was ours, it was Muslim, it was only Muslim because you stole it. So if theft through war is apparently a legitimate way to get your land, then in theory, doesn't it belong to Israel now? We want it in a war. Honestly, the lack of understanding of history is mind-boggling with some of these people. Although I'm not surprised considering knowing they went to American universities, they learned from TikTok. I'm not surprised they don't understand that this was never Palestinian land. It had Arabs in it, yes, no question. Arabs that came in as immigrants in the 18 and 1900s. But then to say that the Jews who came in at the exact same time somehow don't have a claim, while the Arabs who came in do, makes literally no sense. And it's funny that I say they're very uneducated and don't understand the history, because Mr. Alkhatib says the same thing, where he calls her out for being very uneducated on the topic, and unfortunately she runs out of time as he's ripping her a new one.
Unfortunately, many people talk without understanding that the Palestinian people and the Palestinian Authority, we've already agreed to the 1967
They
borders.
are legally trying to annex that territory.
You've been voted out.
He's trying to explain to her the basic understanding that the Palestinian Arabs have already agreed under the Oslo Accords to a two-state solution that includes some of the area of Area C going to the Israelis. But she's calling it occupation. Someone who knows nothing about the history and nothing about the agreements that have already been put in place. They want all of the land for the Palestinian Arabs. No two-state solution, which is the point that Mr. Alkhatib was starting with. You need to accept a Jewish state if you want a Palestinian state. That's not good enough for these people. Just for some background, this is a Gazan speaking to Mr. Alkhatib.
So my uncle was actually one of the negotiators in the Oslo Accords, the PLO 93, 95. And he's critical of it. He resigned from the Palestinian Authority. In 1993, the PLO recognized Israel as a state. They renounced armed struggle. And what do we get in return? We didn't get self-determination. We didn't get a land. We didn't get a state. And we got more land fragmentation, and we got occupation, and we got more people being killed, more civilians being killed.
Now, here's a perfect example of the Palestinian Arab narrative, which is missing a whole bunch of information. So he starts by saying that Israel and the Palestinian Authority made a deal, which is true, and it didn't lead to a land. It did. They got Area A and B, which they didn't have prior to that, and they have their own government now, the Palestinian Authority. Oslo created that. They also had their own security forces, their own laws. They now have their own Palestinian Authority, nationality, and passports. That didn't exist. Now, this was never intended to be a full-time forever plan. It was a transitional period, which then led to more things in the future. We'll get to that. But his claim that nothing happened following the Oslo Accords was completely BS. A lot happened. The current status right now is because of the Oslo Accords. And what did he say came next after the failed Oslo Accords, according to him? Fragmentation, occupation. What he's leaving out here, which we'll get to in a second also, is the fact that the Intifada started in the 2000s. So that's why all of the other things eventually started to happen, because the Palestinian Arabs, after rejecting the next phase of the Oslo Accords, decided to have the second Intifada and then start suicide bombings, which Mr. Alkhatib will talk about. That's why all of those negative things started happening. Checkpoints, walls needed to go up, because you were blowing people up in pizza shops and on buses. You can't leave that out of the story. It's kind of a big deal. This is how they work. I hate to say, the Palestinian Arabs, they try and use the facts that work for them. Like, yeah, the Oslo Accords happened, but then look what happened after that, leaving out everything that they did to cause the next thing to happen. It is absolutely hilarious how dumb people are that they don't see this. And thankfully, Mr. Alkhatib doesn't let him get away with this. He sets the record straight.
Simultaneous with Hamas suicide bombers, and you're a son of Gaza. Yahya Ayyash, Ahmad Agil, you know those names, right? Salah Shahada, you know those, the OG suicide bombers.
Again, these
that
people
ruined the fragile yet viable Oslo process. We got
what happened with Rabin? Who assassinated him?
The Israeli settlers and the far right.
So the far right Israelis, they killed him because he wanted to make peace with Palestinians.
In parallel with Hamas.
You notice how quickly he wanted to change topics? as Al-Khatib points out the very obvious issue of Hamas and the Intifada and stopping that peace process that was in process. And he's like, well, let's talk about who killed Yitzhak Rabin. It's kind of irrelevant to the point. Israel made the peace deal. And yes, unfortunately, some crazy person killed Yitzhak Rabin for it. But that doesn't change the reality of anything. There still was a peace deal. And you guys turned down the later peace deal. And here you can hear what Mr. Al-Khatib says and how this guy responds.
Why didn't Arafat accept the 2000 Camp David peace?
All propaganda, bullcrap. I don't believe that.
So how about the 2008 Olmert deal that Abbas walked away from because
the PA is corrupt.
I understand that. They're like a mini mafia nowadays. They're like a mini mafia.
They're subcontractors to the Israeli settler project.
Can you believe what you just heard? One Gazan lays out strict facts. The fact that Yasser Arafat and Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian Authority, turned down multiple deals that they were offered. And his only response is, I don't believe that. Or they're corrupt. But the fact is, there are people from the US, from Israel, negotiators, there are even Saudi leaders and leaders from the Middle East who agree that this happened. Bill Clinton has been incredibly transparent about this Camp David Accord that failed. You may not like this reality, but it is still reality, even if you don't like it. And simply the fact that you think it didn't happen or that the PA is corrupt doesn't change the fact that they were offered a two-state. And you guys, the Palestinian Arabs, clearly need to figure out why your leadership turned it down. Again. That is not the Israeli state not wanting peace. They offered it, you turned it down for the 12th time. Sometimes it just really boggles my mind that we blame the Western useful idiots for being stupid and for not understanding. Here you have a Gazan who lived there, who has no idea about his own history or purposely rejects anything that goes against his chosen narrative, despite the facts. He kind of admits that Yasser Arafat turned it down, but it's because they're corrupt, but also it didn't really happen. Even their narrative doesn't even make sense. As long as the Israelis are the only ones that we blame, who really cares how we get there? And our last speaker that we're going to hear from on this claim is a Palestinian Arab woman who honestly, in our last episode, made some of the stupidest claims I have ever heard, and you'll hear it repeat.
I wanted to come up here and talk about a couple of things. Again, I, first of all, can't speak to what happens in Palestine as I don't live there, and you don't live there either, right? Want to get that clear. But I do want to talk about the history of Zionism and what Israel was founded on. How, like in Plan Delete, which was written in the 1940s, is the exact plan that Smotrich and Netanyahu are carrying out. You can condemn them all you want, but these are just props of the entire thing of what Israel's founded on.
Just like the last time we heard from this young lady, the amount of bullshit coming out of her mouth is so laughable. And it's laughable because she doesn't even know how to say the things that she's claiming she knows about. I do want to point out the interesting way that she mentions, for sort of no reason, I don't live in Palestine, so therefore I don't know what I'm talking about, and neither do you. I don't know if this is an attempt for her to discredit whatever he says. What do you know? You don't live there. Now, I don't know if this lady ever lived there at any point in her life, which would lend her to be less credible than someone who lived there. But Mr. Al-Khatib lived there until somewhat recently. So for you to disqualify him, well, you're living in America now, so you and I are kind of on equal footing for how much we know about what's going on. Disagree if you were born in America and have never even visited. So it's an interesting way to start your argument by trying to discredit the guy you're talking to. But let's put that aside. Oh, how much I want to laugh at this woman. Plan Delete, like delete on a keyboard. The actual lie that they use is called Plan Dalit, like the letter D in Hebrew, for anyone who doesn't speak Hebrew. Dalit. Now, if you know Hebrew, you know that Dalit is not the first letter in the alphabet. It is actually the fourth. So you might ask yourself, common sense, why did they choose the fourth letter in the alphabet for this plan that they're going to do? The reason is because there was a plan Aleph, Bet, Gimel, and then Dalid. It was a fourth plan that they had never actually implemented in case Plan A, B, and C didn't work. Plan Dalit was the idea of a full-on offensive attack against Arab towns in the event that they needed to do that during the 1948 Independence War. So the irony when these idiots find this online and think it's some sort of smoking gun. Look, this plan says that they're going to take over Arab towns, and that's proof, despite the fact that it's documented that this plan was never actually implemented, and Ben-Gurion didn't want to use it. It was a proposal, amongst other proposals, that was never implemented. But they use it as a smoking gun. See, your plan, Dalit, says that you were going to take over the land, and now you took over the land, so therefore it was all planned. Complete bullshit. And the irony in the fact that she didn't even know how to pronounce it, let alone what it is. And even stupider is that you're claiming that a plan from 1940 that wasn't implemented then is being implemented today by Netanyahu. It is so unbelievably hilarious. She can't even pronounce the Israeli minister's name, Smotrich, even though she uses him as an example and a source, that a random guy who's in the government somehow controls the entire government and implements this plan Dalit from 1940. I don't see anybody in the American system claiming that a single congressperson or a senator somehow controls the government. But apparently, one minister or two ministers in the Israeli Knesset definitely can start a genocide just because they want to. The amount of talking points that come out of this woman who doesn't even know how to pronounce anything is laughable. I'm trying to literally hold back my laughter listening to her talk. And we'll get back to more craziness right here.
On top of that, Theodore Herzl was saying that we are the penniless society, and looking at also Jabotinsky, who said, at any cost, I'm paraphrasing here, at any cost of the native society, the state will be established. And there are countless other quotes that I'm not bringing up.
I want all of my listeners to go back and listen to Season 4, Episode 149, Who the Real Colonizers Are. Because every single thing that she says is completely debunked in that podcast episode. The early Zionist leaders, ironically, have been misquoted on purpose, some by scholars and some by just idiots online, who have suggested that the Zionists had always intended on taking over. It's kind of like this Plan Dalit lie. If you read the people like Theodore Herzl, Zev Jabotinsky, David Ben-Gurion, who have all been quoted as saying, we need to get rid of the Arabs, we need to kill them all of that is completely debunked. This woman knows nothing about actual facts and clearly only knows talking points, and not that well, to be honest with you. It is laughable how brainwashed this woman is, and she's a Palestinian. She knows nothing about her own history. It truly is remarkable to hear these people be so stupid about their own history. Like it's not even worth their time to do anything other than watch a quick TikTok video about your own people. Open a book. Open multiple books, because to be honest with you, there are many false books out there claiming to be true history. Honestly, it's literally infuriating that they actually are trying to pull this BS while claiming to be someone who understands. But now I can see why she had to try and discredit Al-Khatib right off the bat, so she doesn't look as stupid as she is, because they're both on an equal plane. Neither of them really know what's going on.
If we do not address the pain of the Nakba and everything that happened, what's stopping Israel from carrying out this? Because they continue to build settlements in defiance of international law. They continue to carry out a genocide in defiance of international law. How are they going to move forward? And please don't bring up Hamas, because in the West Bank, there's not a single Hamas ruling. We know it's the PA.
That's inaccurate, actually. Hamas is very active.
It's always default. I would really love to have a productive convo.
But I mean, I agree. Like, I'm just saying, to help your talking points be better, just don't bring up the no Hamas in the West Bank. Like, okay, let's retire that. Let's retire that. There is some.
Okay, sure.
I love the fact that this person got called out, and their response to being called out for being factually wrong was, well, I'm just trying to have a civil conversation here, i.e., can you please stop correcting my false claims, because it's really annoying and I can't really get my fake point out when you keep correcting me. Obviously, it goes without saying, for anyone who's listened to our podcast, you know this genocide thing is a lie. The ICJ, the ICC, even Amnesty International all have said, technically speaking, there is no genocide by the proper definition of genocide. The so-called settlements she speaks about are not illegal. They're not against international law for a variety of reasons. One being the fact that these settlements are created in areas that were agreed to under Oslo to be Israeli land. So therefore, it cannot be illegal if the Palestinian Arabs literally agreed to it. Also, any land that was taken in a defensive war under international law is not illegal. The land all technically belongs to Israel. And lastly, if you've ever heard any of our episodes, you know that the Nakba is completely a lie, as according to the person who created the word Nakba, admitted that the Nakba was the Arabs starting a war, kicking the Arabs out of the land, 750,000 or so, telling them to leave, and then losing their houses and keeping them in refugee camps. The Nakba, or catastrophe, was actually the Arabs' doing, and that's the man who created the term. It was only later repurposed to claim that the Israelis did it. That didn't happen until the 1960s. This woman could spout out so many conspiracy theories so quickly, it's really funny. I honestly wonder if the reason why she went on this huge tirade about every single talking point and buzzword that she can think of was because she got called out for being wrong in regards to Hamas being in the West Bank. So she felt like just spewing all of this BS to muddy the waters, maybe people wouldn't notice that she just got ripped a new one by a guy who actually knows the facts, and then says, can we have a real conversation here, like not where you're correcting me and calling me out for my lies? Just like Alkhatib said, Hamas is in the West Bank. Hamas is taking control of whole areas of the West Bank. That's not even a secret. The only people that pretend it's not true are these pro-Pallies who try and use it as an excuse for, see, why are they doing this in the West Bank? I thought this was only about Hamas. Well, the reality is Hamas is in the West Bank, and that's why it's happening. If you remember, the start of this episode was the claim that we need to have a Palestinian state next to an Israeli state, meaning you need to recognize the Israeli state's existence in order to have a Palestinian state, which is a pretty fair point. You can't have one without the other if you want a two-state solution. But clearly none of the people who were debating on the supposed pro-Palestinian side even want an Israeli state. All of them use terms like genociders and ethnic cleansing, and they don't belong here because they're colonizers. So they aren't looking for a two-state solution. This entire claim, unfortunately, just ended up being a Israel bashing session where he didn't really get a chance to defend, and they really didn't care about two states. It only goes to show how they really feel. They just want Israel to be gone, and that's it. They don't really want a two-state solution, unlike Mr. Alkhatib. In the end, this is the last episode of our Surrounded series where we're going through these horrible fake talking points. Honestly, it was such a pain to get through this entire broadcast. It's over an hour. We didn't even get to the final claim where Mr. Alkhatib talks to the one person that he chooses to speak to, and they go over that pro-Palestinians claim where he debunks them. But honestly, it is exhausting. It is filled with a bunch of useful idiots who know nothing about the history to try to tell a Gazan what he should think and feel, cutting him off at every chance they could get. And then you even have some Palestinian Arabs themselves who are spreading lies, who are claiming nothing that we know to be true is true. Everything you're saying is a lie because I don't want it to be true. It is absolutely ridiculous to watch this. Again, if you want to go and watch it, I didn't play the entire thing here over these 4 episodes, but I warn you, it is painful. Mr. Alkhatib tried his best. He's not really that good at debating. You can tell he stutters a lot. He can't get his point across. At one point, he sort of wasn't pushing back and letting these people go on long rants. It was pretty bad, to be honest. So I really wanted to try to help defend him because he could have made these points. Unfortunately, he just wasn't a strong enough debater to do it. And honestly, I think he is at a disadvantage because he still subscribes to somewhat of the fake Palestinian narrative. He tries to walk the line of both sides where he admits to actual facts that we know to be true, but then he also tries to layer in some of the levels of Palestinian lies about the Nakba and about kicking people out of their land and other things that he really can't go against because that's sort of their whole thing. If he admits that this part was a lie, then it calls into question pretty much everything else he says. How do you pick and choose which part is a lie and which part is true when, I hate to say, most of it's a lie? Hopefully you enjoyed this series where we went through this video. We tried to give commentary and background so that way you could maybe understand, based on the very often used talking points, what the reality is, what the facts are, what the history is. Because I'm sure many of you probably hear these all the time. And now, thanks to this podcast, hopefully you'll be able to better defend against these falsehoods and these lies and these talking points. This has been another episode of the Jewish Diaspora Report. Don't forget to check us out on social media at jdr.podcast and check out some of our other episodes on your favorite podcast source. We'll see you next time.